Yes, welcome everybody to this event preview. We will be starting in just a few moments. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this preview for our Well Integrity workshop to be held in September in The Hague. I can see that we are now 80 attendees here, so still people coming in. We will here present the background and the program for the event to be held in September, which was originally planned already to be held as an in-person event last year in September, but was postponed due to COVID. First from September to March, and then March till this coming September. Since then, several events have caused even more pressure on demand for hydrocarbons, making the challenge of managing safely our mature assets and wells even more relevant. More pressure on getting defective wells back in production, really. At the same time, we still have updated regulations, societal and environmental demands becoming increasingly important to maintain our license to operate. And we need greater transparency how we assure managing the wells over the full life cycle. That's an expectation from regulators certainly, and from the society altogether. Please go to the next slide. Simon Spark and I are co-chairing the event in collaboration with a group of experienced peers presented on the next slides. So please go to the next slide. As you can see, the committee is broadly composed of individuals, highly experienced individuals, representing both operators, legislators, service providers, technology research and facilitation organizations, and consultants also. And the idea with the workshop is to cover relevant topics within most of the life cycle of a well, except the plug and abandonment phase, which is covered by several other workshops and conferences. Instead, we will here also in this workshop take a look at alternative use of wells when the wells are not in service for hydrocarbon production anymore. You will notice also when we go through the sessions that we have actually two sessions about managing risk, which is what managing well integrity is essentially all about. We will go through these sessions, as mentioned, to discuss the idea behind the session, to present or to introduce the speakers and the topics which they will present. And we believe we have lined up a good suite of speakers with interesting subjects, and want to present it to you to grow your interest in registering for this event, and maybe also spread the information about this event. to get a good participation at the event. I want to mention one of the enablers making it possible to hold this event. That's the sponsors. So we have for this preview event, we have the sponsor, International Well Integrity, covering the expenditure related to this. And also thanks to the sponsors for the main event, which are Schlumberger and Expro as gold sponsors and Wellscape as the bronze sponsor. We are still open to accept more silver and bronze sponsors, whereas there's no more room for gold sponsors. My co-chair, Simon Spark, has been nominated and accepted as an SPE Distinguished Lecturer on the subject History and Well Integrity, Events and Evolution of an Industry Standard. And he will kindly give a shorter extract of that presentation as an icebreaker introduction at the in-person event in September. So that's before the sessions we are going through now. Please note the session is being recorded and will be shared with all participants after this event, and you will get a mail with information where to find the presentation. We will also try to get it posted on the SPE WITS section homepage. Now we'll go to present the individual sessions, and I would like to hand over to Stuart Connon on session number 1.
Excellent, thanks, Philip. Hello, my name is Stuart Connon and I am the lead well integrity engineer for Total Energies in the UK. And I'm delighted to be part of the organising committee for this SPE workshop in September, and also to be co-chair for session 1. In this session, we plan to explore the regulatory environment, focusing primarily on the Norwegian and UK sectors. We will gain an insight into what's been happening, where we are today, and where we're heading. And as I'm sure you're all aware, at the turn of the last decade, we in the industry were rocked by a few defining events. In response to these events, the oil and gas industry has undertaken a global step change in its approach to well integrity management, with a significant effort being put into defining, updating, and creating numerous standards, guidelines, and legislation. Despite this continuous improvements that have been made to defining the industry literature, there remains a requirement to review and update. This is now focusing towards an energy transition and how we can reduce our environmental impact through, for example, the use of CCUS. We also have to look at how we efficiently and effectively decommission our well stock, and indeed how we manage them through late life to that point. We have a great lineup of presenters and topics for the session that will give insight into what has been happening, what the performance of the industry has been, and what we can expect to come. And with that, I'm now going to hand over to my session co-chair, Nina, to explain the first presentation for session 1. Nina.
Thank you. So my name is Nina Ringen. I work as a principal engineer within the discipline of drilling and well technology in the Petroleum Safety Authority Norway. And at this conference, I will give you an introduction to the Norwegian regulations within drilling and wells, with a roadmap and a link to the new revision 5 of NORSOC D010 with some examples of the recent changes. I will also give you an overview of the wells on the Norwegian continental sector with the well integrity categorization or well integrity status. And perhaps also some statistics with respect to temporary abandoned wells and the number of permanent abandoned wells. So I'm looking forward to see you all in The Hague in September. So then I will hand over to Stuart again.
Excellent, thanks Nina. Can't wait to see what's been happening in Norway. In our second presentation, we'll be looking more back in the UK, and we'll hear from Karim Shafi from Offshore Energies UK, formerly known as Oil and Gas UK. Karim is a business advisor at OE UK and has been working within the Wells Forum, that publishes the industry guidelines that define good practice in the UKCS. In Kareem's presentation, he will provide attendees with an insight into the relevant UK and EU regulation concerning well operations and the emerging CCUS transition, whilst covering a deep dive into the development of the Offshore Energies UK Well Forum guidelines and how they support operators in meeting their regulatory obligation. He will then provide an overview of the OEUK Well Integrity Guidelines and the work plan for future guidance within the Wells Forum to support the energy transition. And our final presentation for session one, I'm delighted that we're going to have Graham Skinner, who is a Senior Wells Inspector with the UK Health and Safety Executive. I've seen Graham present on a few occasions before, and he always provides a great overview of performance in the UKCS, and I'm sure he will provide content that's applicable to other areas and other regions. In his presentation, we will hear about recent findings from incident investigation and regulatory inspections related to well integrity, which, without giving too much away, will tie in very nicely to the subsequent sessions in the workshop. As you can see, we have a great lineup of content and presenters for the session. I'm sure you'll all find it very informative. And with that, I will now hand over to an intro for session 2. See you in September.
Great, thanks, Stuart. So for session 2 is titled Asset Lifecycle Well Design. My name is Simon Copping. I'm a Well Integrity Domain Champion at Well Barrier. And working with me on this session has been Nicholas Bonnier from Geostock and Nina Ringon from the PSA in Norway. So the definition of well integrity, according to ISO 16530, is the application of technical, operational, and organizational methods to prevent the uncontrolled flow of fluids at the surface or across subsurface formations throughout the life cycle of the well. But what does that really mean? So what I decided to do, I took all of the content from ISO 16530, which is well over 100 pages of text, something like 50,000 words, and I put them into one of these word clouds. And the nice thing about these word clouds is it looks at the distribution or the frequency of words in a document and tells you visually how prominent that word is. And we can see here that words like pressure, pressure appears more than 300 times in that document. Risk, integrity, annulus, barrier also feature prominently in the ISO standard. So it's good because this whole workshop, and as you'll see from the subsequent sessions, focusing on those specific topic areas. So in this session, we will hear from operators about what makes a well integrity management system robust and how they address these requirements of the standards. So I'm really delighted to introduce Tor Paulson, who's a senior well control and integrity advisor with 27 years experience at Equinor. Tor will share thoughts on the challenges of late life, low pressure production. So one of Equinor's subsea developments came online in 1999 with a design life of 20 years and was facing some challenges due to depleted reservoir, leading to a low pressure production scenario. During the well evaluation work, it was discovered that the combination of low reservoir pressure and 3 high permeable zones in the overburden was a combination that could threaten the integrity of the wells, where one barrier failure could lead automatically to a second barrier failure. So there was some doubt about the independence between the 2 barrier envelopes. So Tor will describe how Equinor set up a task force conducting risk analysis simulations, physical testing, numerical modeling to draw some conclusions of the situation. I'm also happy to introduce Justin Parker, who's got 20 years of drilling and well integrity experience, and he's currently the well integrity team lead at Oxy in Oman. His presentation is on how they established a well integrity management system for a mature field, and he's going to highlight the importance of a solid foundation on which to build the management system, and he's going to draw some comparisons to an HSE management system. He's going to describe the benefits of leveraging existing best practices to avoid reinventing the wheel, and how an effective WIMS can, in late life, can optimize decommissioning operations. He's also going to share some case studies that have raised awareness, gain acceptance, but also looking at the differentiation between cost and value. So it should be a very interesting presentation. We're also going to be looking at recent progress in engineering and qualification. So I've moved ahead a slide here. Yeah, we're also going to look at recent progress in engineering and qualification of creeping formations as a fully fledged barrier envelope. So it's great to have Trond Golder Christensen, who's Chief Engineer for Rock Mechanics at Aker BP. He's got 20 years experience and passionate about applying geo and rock mechanics to solve various challenges to the oil and gas industry. So Trond is going to share Aker BP's experience with qualifying shale as a barrier in new wells. So he's going to be building on the industry use of shale as barriers for plug and abandonment, and data from the technology implementation in the field will be shared and discussed. So in summary, I think the session will give a great overview of the different building blocks required for well integrity, as we see in the word cloud on the slide here. And I'm really grateful to all of the speakers and looking forward to them sharing their expertise. And with that, I'll hand over to the next session.
Simon, thank you very much. This is Simon Spark. All of you, thank you very much for dialing in. I know that for some of you it's extremely late at night, and for others it's quite early in the morning. But at least we have a large number of participants who are listening and hopefully going to be pitching up for the event in September. How many wells are there in the world? There are various estimates. None of them are very accurate, but a number I use is about 2 million wells. That's oil, gas, water, and various different estimates are used for the number of wells that have sustained casing pressure. And the most recent one was given by Shell, and that was gave a number of approximately 50% of those wells have sustained casing pressure. So that means there is an extremely large number of wells with problems. And I think we can all tick that box and say, yeah, it's probably a good number. So what we have in this session is certainly 2 presentations and possibly a third. And they're practical, they're realistic, they're meaningful. And while we've got API 90 and a bunch of MSCs and PhDs that write around sustained casing pressure, what we have here on this element of the workshop will be something that's very practical. So we've got Felicia Kirstian, who's from OMV, and she and her team have built a lubricate and bleed package for onshore wells in the OMV environment. And she's going to be presenting and demonstrating how practical it is, how it works and the benefits of it, and indicating that I think it's something that takes time. It's not going to be, you can't rush it. It's like a good bottle of wine that's aging. You have to take time with it. So she will provide, I think, a very graphic presentation on how to eliminate sustained casing pressure. And then we've got Neil Ferguson from Expro, who the company have acquired digital slickline. And within this, they've got a package of tools that can collect a large amount of data from various different casing streams and cement streams and look at where the problems are and where the passage of the problems are going to. So we've got one solution and one diagnostics, and I think that will then provide a great talking point and ideas for people to move forward and look at utilizing this sort of system within their wells. There's a possible third speaker who I can't yet name because we don't have confirmation and we're waiting on an operator supporting it. So with that, I will hand over to the next speaker on the list.
Yes, I'm Gutjan Herens. I'm a research program manager at the TNO, which is an institute in the Netherlands of applied technology. I'm very pleased to host this session with Jason Sauter, who unfortunately couldn't be here. While the previous session is all about management and asset integrity procedures, which are quite important, to me it all starts also with the barrier and technology to construct the barrier, which is mainly built from cement and steel, of course, casing, tubings, and filling the endless with the sealing cement. Yeah, that's where it starts. And your performance of the barrier is depending on the material properties. And to me, if you have ways to improve, modify, and know certain material properties, then you have tools and meanings to develop new ideas and products and introduce innovations. I think in this session, we have a nice mixture of new ways to construct or improve barriers. And that starts with, well, I say, knowing your material properties, being able to modify it and take advantage of it. My first interested speaker session is done by Wout Kultjens, who is a principal technical expert at Shell, and they have a technology developed where they are able to densify the cement. So being able to basically reliquefy cement and seal off endless. It's a quite impressive technology, and they will take us through the way they developed it and what it can and what it can't do. Another very interesting talk is about the evolution of new cement developments of Mileva Radonjic, who is associate professor at Oklahoma University. And she's working with additives to cement, graphene and olefins, which creates new properties in self-healing and ductile properties of cement. Main aim on high temperature geothermal, but I think it's also quite interesting for oil and gas operations. Now, another other way of working is using the knowledge of creating friction between materials and use that to design a connection, which is not based on thread, but on friction. And similar to how shipyards attach their propeller to the shaft, you can also create a new connection method for casings. This promising innovation is explained in the third presentation we have. And then the final presentation is given by Cornel van der Meer, who is the product manager at Huisman Equipment. They spent years investing and developing a full dairy casing design, including a connection method, and they qualified it and they looking at applications in geothermal, where corrosion and scaling is quite an issue. But of course, when it functions, it has also a broader application. I think all in all, we have interesting developments, which, well, I hope for all will be leading to new ideas and insight for your own business as well. And with that, I will I give the floor to the next speaker.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ian Taylor. I'm the principal technical expert for well integrity for Shell globally. But I think in this session 5, it's going to be a little bit more about me talking about what I believe and not what Shell believes. So, and the reason about that is this session, the intention of what we're trying to do, Matty and myself, in this is have a conversation about something that's happening. I mean, we call it the L word. It's the leak world, which obviously never happens, but we've got a little bit more comfortable about the S word, which is seeps and possibly weeps. So this is a session a little bit about how do we take control of this agenda, or maybe get ahead of it before we find ourselves overrun by the regulators, whether they're in the EU or anywhere else, that starts to put some boundaries around us and starts having a conversation about there shall be no leaks, there shall be nothing. Is that achievable? Could we ever have it? So we're worried about that. You know, the agenda around about methane emissions, CO2 emissions, the weeps from abandoned wells, we've all kind of seen a little bit of that. We've seen the work that GMR have done in the North Sea, where they've surveyed a number of wells and have come to the conclusion that there are a number of abandoned wells that have bubbles of methane. The agenda then, or the discussion is, if you try to extrapolate, then that's an awful lot of methane. Is it okay to say that's only a small amount? Is it okay to say that that's probably biogenic rather than thermogenic, so it's going to happen anyway? Do we get to control that agenda? Do we get to say anything about it? So the idea in this session is to have a little bit of fun and explore where we go with methane, and maybe where we go also with in the carbon capture space, where we start to inject CO2. And if we have some leakage from the existing wells, is that okay? Because we're probably on balance having a good effect by injecting. So that's the idea of this session. We did hope to have GMR come and explain what they found to us. It's proving a little bit difficult, but we've got some other people. So if I may, I'm going to let Matthew take over and introduce some of the people we've got and explain a little bit more about what we hope to achieve in what I think is going to be quite a fun session. So yeah, hey, Matthew.
Thanks, Ian. You're absolutely right. We're planning to make it interactive, debating all together. So we'll be there to whip up the audience a little bit. But first, we'll start with Cindy. So Cindy works for a company called the Sniffers. No prize for guessing what they do. And actually, their expertise is on land, detecting leaks, and they've been doing it for quite some time. Cindy, she's been in the pipeline business for 17 years now, and she is their business development manager. What we also will get is somebody from Carbon Connect. So we're discussing with Johanna. Everybody knows her, of course. But there may be Darcy, Spady. Everybody knows him as well. Who'll come and tell us about the sustainability and a bit about the North American, especially Canadian space, which somehow I would say is a bit ahead of the pack. And then with Ian, again, we'll try to open the dances by, getting the cat out of the bag and try to discuss together, is there a way that we can, okay, so leaks are not acceptable. Can they be tolerable? Can we make them tolerable by making the miscreant pay? So, well, I'll be looking forward to get everybody to pitch in. And I would like to hand over to Stuart and the perception of risk.
Thank you, Matteo. My name's Stuart Girling from GMVI, and with my session co-chair, Willem Boone from Spirit Energy, I'll have the pleasure to lead a panel session with some very experienced specialists, each of whom have some strong opinions. Session 6 is titled, What do we perceive as risk? And the session is designed to help you consider well integrity risks from many different angles, including some you may never have thought about before. The panel members will each make a brief presentation, then participate in an open panel session with workshop attendees. You can see our experts listed on the slides on the right hand of the slide. Graham Skinner, who you will have already seen in session 1, is from the Health and Safety Executive in the UK, and he will put the view of a regulator. Peter Sproul works as a well examiner for NRG in Aberdeen and will speak about well integrity risks from that vantage point. Pascal Ray from Puma Risk is from the insurance sector in the US and works internationally also. He describes himself as a well-controlled underwriter. I'm happy to say that Pascal is on this call with us today, and when I have finished, will give us a quick flavor of some of the things he will talk about in The Hague. George Galloway is an experienced well engineer who works at Well Academy, a training organization specializing in drilling and well intervention training. George is based in the Netherlands and has some insightful views on human factors as they relate to well risk. And finally, David Buckmiller is a principal engineer at DNV in Oslo, and in many respects is DNV's go-to guy in wells-related risk consulting. So each of the panelists will briefly present their own interpretation of these questions. What does well integrity risk mean to you, and how do you define it? How do you view consequential risks of well integrity failures? How do you view, assess, and evaluate well integrity risk? What do you do or think should be done to ensure well integrity risk is managed effectively? Session 6 aims to include ideas and views that well integrity specialists don't routinely cover. And as an illustration of this, I'd now like to introduce Pascal Ray. Over to you, Pascal.
Thanks, Stuart. We're going to be looking at these 4 key well integrity questions from a different perspective. The first one is, the problem is broken business models and engineering strategies as a solution. The second is, we have a time horizon perspective problem. We're dealing with ultra short-term profit-based extraction models paired with ultra long-term well integrity risks. There's questions about if this is sustainable over time. The procurement problem, total cost of ownership and total cost of risk are not factors at the basis of the low-cost procurement model, which is a factor in well integrity risk. Upstream oil and gas needs to look at total value to total cost and possibly rethink this model. The corporate risk management perspective problem. The well integrity risk problem is not the problem. The problem is the attitude about the problem. We're going to do a deep dive on that. Also, the technology that we have now creates a new barrier to well integrity risk. We call this the virtual barrier. We've got incredible proactive real-time analytics and monitoring technologies that can be a game changer to well integrity risk. And the last one is discussing the petroleum engineering silo and helping you understand, the synergies that can be had by stepping out of that silo, including bringing down the cost of capital to E&P companies as a cost reduction strategy, risk transfer as a profit center, and also as an ESG resource. And this is especially applicable in the United States. Thanks, Stuart, and we're looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much, Pascal. As you hear from Pascal, obviously there's going to be some diverse views about well integrity risk from him and the other panel speakers. So the panel session will lead into and potentially challenge some well-operated views about well integrity risk management, and that will follow in session 7. And I'm now going to hand back to Simon Copping to speak about that.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. And just a reminder, the Q&A box is available. I see there's a few questions going in, so if there's any questions from the audience, please use the Q&A box. So yeah, session 7 is nicely dovetailed with session number 6. It's titled Managing and Evaluating Risk. And working with me on this session has been Philip Vodka from TotalEnergies. So operators typically apply a range of techniques to manage their well integrity risk assessment. So fault tree analysis, bow tie analysis, failure mode effect and criticality, and so on. And a common challenge is consolidating all of that well integrity related data, understanding the vulnerabilities associated with the anomalies, whilst considering things like the operating and environmental conditions in a systematic and objective manner. And objective is a very key word there, because if you take an example on the screen here, if I ask you how risky is this well, it's got tubing to annulus. It's a gas storage well. It's 70 years old. It's got tubing to annulus communication. There's groundwater detected in the B-annulus on the backside of the production casing, so potentially corrosive environment. How risky is this? It's close to a town, or it's close to a town. You'll notice here it's got a very shallow surface casing, so if we did have a leak, we've got potential for there's no way the formation would take that pressure. How risky is that well? And I could ask everybody on this call today, all the participants, how risky is this well? And people will come up with different answers based upon your understanding, your perception, your experience. And we can't have that. We want a consistent and objective and systematic way of doing this. So this session is going to showcase a selection of operator case studies that demonstrate real-world processes and systems and how they're used to evaluate and manage risks associated with well integrity. So Natascha Maurer is the focal point for well integrity at Wintershall in Germany, and she's sharing insights about the best practices for qualitative risk assessments. So in Wintershall, all the business units carry out risk assessments if any element of the barrier envelope is degraded or if it's failed. And Natascha is going to describe how Wintershall apply their failure model to categorize the well and evaluate the consequences. She's going to share how the German business unit has qualitatively worked through this process for 27 wells, but in synchronization with the corporate Wintershall risk management policy and how this has achieved faster decision-making at a corporate level. And she's also going to share how this process has become a benchmark for all the other business units to follow. Peter Lutzen, the well integrity and decommissioning engineer at TotalEnergies in Denmark, and he's the focal point and specialist in implementing and optimizing their well failure model, as it's a key tool for their integrity management. So Peter's presentation is about increasing efficiency and safety by implementing the failure model. So through a detailed analysis of historical failures going back 5 years, 10 different failure types were identified, which covered 95% of all well-related failures. And these failures were risk assessed using a fault tree approach. And this resulted in a set of predefined risk assessments, each with associated mitigations and recommended repair times. So by constructing the failure model tree, all engineers are able to safely operate over 420 brownfield wells while still maximizing production using a safe, fast, and consistent response to anomalies that arise. The final speaker in the session is Christian Kossak from Uniper, where he's going to be talking about from risk evaluation to project execution. So we're still awaiting the final abstract from Christian, although I know the presentation will be an insightful overview of their process and about how they implement and prioritize the risk of their storage wells. So I think in summary, what you'll see and learn from these presentations is a very systematic and very objective approach to risk evaluation. And with that, I'll hand over to the next session.
Great, thanks, Simon. My name is Logan Tippett. I am the Weatherford Wireline Technical Sales Representative for the North Sea and our Sub-Saharan Africa geozones. I've been with Weatherford about 18 years now. I'm currently based in the UK. My co-chair for this session will be Nicolas Bonnier from Geostock in France, although he's on leave at the moment. So for the final presentation of the workshop in September, it's my pleasure to introduce session 8, which will be on the alternative use of wells such as CCS, CCUS, and geothermal, and a bit of framing that in terms of the well integrity perspective. So within this session, our first presentation will be given by Vedran Zikovic from TNO. Vedran is a well technology scientist with a background in both petroleum engineering and geothermal, and he's currently working on the development of new drilling technologies and energy transition projects related to the reuse of wells for CCS and hydrogen storage. Vedran was actually part of the team that developed the methodologies and subsequently the tool that will be the focus of this presentation. So specifically, we're going to see how existing oil and gas fields have the potential for geological CO2 storage as part of the energy transition. And the project in question, you might have heard of it already, is called REX CO2, which was developed as a standalone well reuse screening tool to identify wells that could be safely repurposed for CO2 storage. The assessment framework that was based on state-of-the-art practices, international standards, guidelines, regulatory frameworks, and supported by experimental design data. The tool can qualitatively screen candidate wells, aiding design concepts and selection of the decision-making process. Further, the tool was validated by screening dozens of wells of several potential CO2 injection sites with a consortium of 19 international partners, which showcased a consistent manner of identifying critical aspects related to well integrity, mitigation options, and the potential reuse of wells for CO2 storage. The second presentation will be given by Frank Villegas, who is from TotalEnergies, although he is currently a secondee at Equinor in Norway. So Frank is a senior drilling and wells engineer with backgrounds in both petroleum and civil engineering, with extensive international experience in drilling, well engineering, and operations for carbon capture and storage and oil and gas applications. Frank's presentation will focus on some key aspects of the Northern Lights project, which is the transportation and storage component of the Norwegian full-scale CCS project called Longship. Here, specifically, there'll be a focus on well integrity, touching on well architecture and completion design of the first 2 CO2 injector wells, well barrier monitoring, the cap rock strength evaluation, legacy well assessment methodology, and the strategy to monitor the CO2 plume migration. And finally, our last presentation of the workshop will be given by Dio Verbeest. So Dio is currently the team lead for well engineering for well engineering at ECW Energy, and has recently spent 5 years as the Secretary of Operations at Geothermy Netherlands. Prior to this, Dio spent about 16 years as the HSE manager with Hunting Energy Services. So here, Dio's presentation is going to focus on the Dutch industry standard for sustainable well design and how different well designs can meet the standard. He's also going to have a look at the use of GRE-lined casings in larger diameter casings, coating options on the injector wells, the cost impact of CRA materials, and finally, the life cycle analysis in geothermal wells. Of course, all with the underlying theme of well integrity. We also wanted to highlight that in addition to our in-person event being held in The Hague, it's also the hometown of the Dutch Geothermal Association and the International Geothermal Association, with many geothermal operators in the close vicinity. And with that, I'll pass the microphone back to our workshop leader. Thanks, and look forward to seeing you in September.
Yes, thanks everybody. Thanks for introducing the sessions. I hope it's been worthwhile for the attendees, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the committee members, session leaders for taking the time to help organize this workshop. As I would like to thank also all the attendees for listening in, taking your time for that. To some facts about the workshop, as you probably know, it's on 6th-7th September in The Hague. And here we show the registration fee for SPE members. Non-members can also attend if there's room, because it's a limited attendance event, about room for 70 people. And there's a link here to register for the event, as well as the link for the hotel where it will take place, Leonardo Royal Hotel in Hague, where you can reserve accommodation via the hotel at the link, the blue link saying reserving your accommodation. We hope you found this preview inspiring and that it has grown your interest such that you will register and go out and spread the word around it. I think it's time to then, if there's anything to cover on the questions raised. Simon, do you have a track of that?
Loads of questions. Yeah, there's loads of questions coming in on the side in the chat window, and I know the committee members have been trying to answer those directly. It's almost too many to try and read out. I think there's common themes coming through about corrosion management, about CO2, about geothermal, about artificial intelligence. So I don't know best way to handle this other than to perhaps say if your question hasn't been answered by the committee, there is pop it into the Q&A window, because they've all been happening in the chat. Then I imagine the Q&A window is going to come up pretty quickly. So I'm a little, I mean, many of the questions also, for example, let me just read one out. One of the big problems is oil and gas companies don't want to invest a lot of money in well integrity management. You know, there are solutions, but they need a lot of money. And I think some of the presentations, like specifically Justin Parker from Oxy, is going to be sharing some actual case studies where he will demonstrate how a small investment in the early stages would have prevented a much larger expenditure from things going wrong later on, or kind of trying to avoid burying your head in the sand a little bit. So some of the presentations will talk about that. And I think a lot of the things, how can we standardize regulations will be accepted and adopted worldwide? These are the kind of questions I don't think we can answer on the virtual session like this, but these are the kind of questions when you're at the workshop with all of the committee members, with the people from the operators, from the service companies, from the regulators. It's these kind of discussions which are really going to be what we see at the workshop. And we may not get all of the answers out of the workshop, but we'll certainly be able to kind of move some of these things forward. Somebody's asking, will we share the slides? I believe the session's been recorded and then will be made available through the SPE website. Perhaps I think all the other committee members can also see the chat. So if there's anything that's jumping out that you want to shout out about, feel free.
I would like just to share, Simon, that the question about funds for integrity management or for rectifying, that's of course also often a question which I see with the affiliates I work with Untitled Energies. It's actually a question of addressing the risk, highlighting the risk, making people aware of the risk, instead of fiddling around with the kind of managing the issues without actually highlighting what is the risk associated with these issues. Many times actually pointing out that this is high level risk, level 2 or 3, 1, sorry, that also leads to actually that you can be able to get budget for it. So I think it all comes back to actually being able to address the risk, assess the risk, correct risk assessments, consistent. So, and yeah, the presentation, we will share the presentation on the LinkedIn page, and and as Simon Copping stated also, we will share the presentation. You will get a mail where it is shared, but at the Aberdeen section homepage, SPE Aberdeen section is hosting this event for us, and they will post a YouTube recording of this event. We will also post it on the LinkedIn page and try to get it on the SPE Well Integrity Technical section homepage, as well as the slides. Anything else from my colleagues in the committee that you have noticed on the questions that we should address now?
There's a good question from Tom. Just came in on the chat, which is, are we planning for a mixed meeting in The Hague where people can also attend remotely since the places are numbered? And the answer is, I don't think so. The technology for it is way, way, way beyond what we can master. So sorry about that, Tom. But first come, first serve. So book your place.
Yes, we feel the interaction amongst people, and the discussions you can hold face to face is quite high value. And on top of that, SPE are not able to host both virtual and in-person event. We have discussed that in the committee before.
Yep. There's a couple of interesting questions that have come in on the chat line that I'd like to sort of mention. We've got a question here that says, how can we standardize regulations that will be accepted and adopted worldwide? And you and I know, as do several others on the committee, the work that goes into writing these standards, as they were. So, we wrote the ISO standard. It takes a very long time and is extremely hard work, but they are out there. But trying to get every country to buy into it is not easy. I mean, there's a hell of an argument going on in Texas right now. And they won't do anything unless they're told to do it, because that's the law. Yeah. So that's one of the issues that there is globally. And then we have another question here about from companies don't want to invest a lot of money in the well integrity management. Well, by not investing in that, your cost actually escalates significantly when it does go wrong, because you have to bring in the cavalry to sort it out. Well integrity management is actually relatively inexpensive to do if you get it right and you do it from the front end, rather than come in late and sort of reverse engineer everything. And we, in many parts of the world, have no choice. If we don't manage our wells properly, there are significant fines, jail sentences in some countries, and you stand a very good chance of losing not just your reputational loss, but also financial loss and losing the license.
It was good.
Does anyone else have any other questions they want to answer?
I think we're getting close to wrapping up. So I would personally like to thank everybody, and especially Diane and Louise, because this thing was very, very well arranged. Oh, there was just a question from Tom on orphan wells. What would you put the orphan wells, Tom? Because we probably will do it when we'll review the L word, because it's just there and they contribute. So Simon was mentioning 2 million wells. So we'll probably have 8 million wells out there nobody's even covering. So we will discuss them on the site, but orphan wells is an issue with P&A. And as Philip said, it's kind of out of scope. No, you're absolutely right. It's partially out of scope, but we'll probably have plenty of coffee and other drinks to discuss them about over it.
That's good, Batia. Yeah, I'd also like to add my thanks to the SPE Aberdeen for their sterling effort in helping organise this for us. Thank you.
All right, I guess it's time to wrap up then with no more questions. Once again, thanks for listening in, and we hope we have steered your interest to register. We will share the slide and the recording to also share with your colleagues. And thanks to the sponsors, both for this event, which is Simon actually, and for the main event. And we hope to see you there in September. And thanks to Diane and Louise in the SPE Aberdeen section for organizing this for us.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.